All right, welcome back to Reformed Thinking. Today, we're digging into the life of a guy named Charles Simeon. He was a pastor back in Cambridge, England, and his story is just an incredible picture of what it means to persevere. I mean, we're talking about someone who stuck it out in one really, really tough spot for his entire life.
So, check out this quote from him. It really tells you everything you need to know about his mindset. He said this when someone asked him, how he put up with so much opposition. He saw suffering as just part of the deal, not some big surprise, but just the pricking of my legs on the way to where you're going. It's an amazing way to frame it, isn't it?
And that brings us to this number, 54. What's that about? Well, that's how many years Charles Simeon pastored the same church. 54 years at Trinity Church in Cambridge. I mean, think about that for a second. In our day and age, that's just mind-blowing. But wait, it gets even crazier when you hear the backstory. So this wasn't just a few people complaining in the back. This was all-out war. For 12 years, his own congregation paid another guy to preach in the afternoon just so they wouldn't have to listen to him. People who owned pews literally locked them with keys so no one could sit down. Simeon bought chairs for the aisles, and you know what the churchwardens did? They threw them out into the churchyard. Students would show up just to cause trouble, disrupt the service, even throw rocks at the windows. This was his life, day in and day out for years and years.
So you gotta ask, right? How on earth did he not just quit? What was the secret? I mean, what kept him stable when pretty much everyone was trying to push him out? It wasn't just because he was a tough guy or super stubborn. No, the real answer, it's all about what was going on inside.
He had this two-part secret. He said the key was to grow downward in humility and, at the same time, grow upward in adoration of Christ. It sounds a little strange, but think of it like this. The more he understood his own sinfulness and need for a savior, the more he was able to truly adore Christ. The two things were totally connected. You couldn't have one without the other. And he had a great picture for this. He called that growing downward part the ballast of humiliation. Now, if you know anything about old ships, ballast is just heavy stuff, rocks, iron, whatever, that you put in the bottom of the boat to keep it from tipping over in a storm. For Simeon, having a right-sized, heavy sense of his own sin was that spiritual ballast. It kept his little boat, his soul, from getting flipped over by all the criticism, or, just as dangerous, by his own pride.
And here's how those two things worked together. The ballast, that humility, it wasn't there to sink him. It was there to keep him steady so he could raise the sails of adoration. You see, he believed that real, genuine worship of Christ could only happen on what he called the freshly plowed soil of humiliation. So the deeper he understood his own need, the more glorious the Savior appeared. One absolutely fueled the other.
And listen to how he puts it himself. This is just incredible. He says, for 40 years, there were only two things he wanted to see: my own vileness and the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Wow. That wasn't just a phase for him. For 4 decades, his eyes were locked on those two things. You can't separate them. It's like you have to see both at the same time to get the full picture. Okay, so you might be thinking, that sounds great, but how do you actually live like that? Well, for Simeon, it didn't just happen by magic. It wasn't an accident. He built this inner life, brick by brick, through some really intense daily discipline. Check out his morning routine. This was non-negotiable for him. He got up at 4 a.m. every single day, even in the dead of a freezing English winter. And from 4 until 8 in the morning, he did nothing but private prayer and study of the scriptures. 4 hours before the day even really started. A friend of his literally said that this was the secret to his strength, right here. And all that strength he was building up every single morning, it wasn't just for him to feel good. It had a purpose. It gave him the fuel for very specific, practical ways of dealing with all that opposition. You see, what he did on the inside totally shaped how he acted on the outside. So what did that look like? Well, he basically had 4 main strategies. 1, don't fight back. Just don't get into it. 2, ignore the rumors and the slander. Just let it go. 3, if someone rebukes you, actually receive it with thanks. And 4, start to see suffering for the gospel not as a burden, but as a privilege. These weren't just nice theories. These were his go-to moves, and they all came from that time he spent with the Lord every morning. Let's go back to that locked pews story. For 10 years, people locked him out. Now, get this.
He actually went to court and won. He had the legal right to go in there and bust open every single one of those locks. But he didn't. Why not? Because this verse from 2 Timothy was running through his head. The servant of the Lord must not strive. He chose to wait on God instead of forcing his own way, even when he had every right to.
And this whole internal framework didn't just shape how he handled enemies. It shaped his preaching, the main thing he did for 54 years. Everything he said from the pulpit had 3 big goals. First, to humble the sinner. Second, to exalt the Savior. And third, to promote holiness. You see the pattern? It's the exact same pattern as his own life. Humility, adoration, and then the fruit of that, which is a holy life.
Because he had this laser focus, his ministry was incredibly consistent. His biographer put it perfectly. He said that because of these 3 aims, everything Simeon preached radiated from Jesus Christ and returned upon him. There was never any question what his sermons were about. For more than 50 years, it was all about Jesus. So what do we take away from this? Simeon's world was a long time ago, but the pressure on pastors, the challenges of just being a Christian, that stuff hasn't changed. And his life really pushes us to ask, where are we looking for our stability? Are we looking for it in easy circumstances or in people liking us? Because Simeon's example shouts that real, lasting stability comes from something else. It comes from looking honestly at our own sin and then letting that drive us to a bigger, more awesome view of Jesus. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Maybe that old-fashioned ballast is exactly what we need today.